Birth certificate authentication. It's all on commerce. Your intent is to take control of that entity. Let's put aside whether that entity is yours or not. But let's focus more on the interest. Let me give you an example. For instance, when you do real estate deals, it's all about the interest in the contract, regardless of whether you're buying and holding or you're wholesaling. Whatever it is you're doing, it's all about interest in a contract. They've insured that bond by way of the Social Security, which links to your sweat equity, right? So when you authenticate that birth certificate, you're saying you want to secure your interests. But what does that constitute, and what are you really doing? Do you really know? Underwriting. Underwriting is the process through which an individual or institution takes on financial risk for a fee. This risk most typically involves loans, insurances, or investments. Yeah, we know they trade in the stock market, right? You are aware of all that. The term underwriter originated from the practice of having each risk taker write their name under the total amount of risk they were willing to accept for a specific premium. Although the mechanics have changed over time, underwriting continues today as a key function in the financial world. The term underwriter originated from the practice of having each risk taker write their name under the total amount of risk they were willing to accept for the specific premium. They write their name under the total amount. This is what underwriting is. Whether your intent is to invest, to insure it, or to give it out as a loan, or to accept it as a loan. The mechanics that have changed over time that it speaks of here is the total amount that you have to put. That birth certificate is a blank check. The total amount that it's worth is not put on its face for the purpose of fractionalization. And even if it is put on its face, it's still fractionalized. But they don't have to put it on its face because there are launches that goes with that, like mortgage. But wait. Underwriting. When someone writes their name under that birth certificate, whose name do you see under that birth certificate that signed it? The clerk. So when you authenticate that birth certificate, here's something most secure parties, creditors, secure party creditors, whatever title you want to claim to be, that most supposed Moors are now falling for too. Confused and lost. If you're authenticating that birth certificate, what you're authenticating is not the certificate itself. Because a certificate is merely an evidence that something exists or something has occurred. It is certifying, hence the word certificate, whatever act it is attached to. But the most important thing that's being done whenever it is authenticated is not the certificate itself. It is the signature and that certificate. Whoever the notary was, whoever the clerk or recorder, that is what you're authenticating. Whoever underwrote that bond called the birth certificate, that is what you are authenticating, not the bond itself. These are the 101s that you need to understand if you're saying that you're a creditor in commerce. If you're saying that they're all fraud, they're doing this, they're doing that, so now I'm going to do this. Okay, so you've authenticated. What now? What do you do now? You still have all these lingering cases going on. How have you used that to assist yourself financially? You haven't. Remember I was speaking about interest? In order for you to understand how interest ties with underwriting and why you are authenticating that birth certificate, you need to go into the rule of evidence. Rule of evidence, it gives you two specific terminology when it comes to authentication. It tells you about self-authenticating evidence and authenticating evidence. Let's first go to self-authenticating evidence. Commercial papers. Listen to this. Whoever it is that's been telling you to authenticate and they're not telling you this, they're leading you astray. Now get back in the straight path. Commercial paper and related documents. Commercial paper, a signature on it, and a related document. Remember I told you an allonge existed? They have an allonge in it. Some people figured out you got to put your own affidavit of ownership. Okay, cool. What about theirs? Now there's a conflict of interest. Commercial paper, a signature on it, and related documents to the extent allowed by general commercial law. What is the extent allowed by general commercial law? The rules regarding underwriting. The rules regarding interest and assignment of contract. Certified documents, records of a regularly conducted activity, is self-authenticating. So if you're thinking you're authenticating the document itself, that's not what you're doing, because that birth certificate or certificate of live birth is already self-authenticating itself, because it is part of a regularly conducted activity by the clerk of, county of, whatever it is, wherever it was issued. It is the certificate itself is already self-authenticated. Why? Because it is naturally part of the regularly preserved documents during a regularly conducted activity. As shown by certification of the custodian or another qualified person that complies with federal statute or rule prescribed by the Supreme Court. Federal statute also is synonymous with the state statute regarding how the clerk and the recorder keeps those birth certificate. Here it is again. That certificate itself, that blank check called a birth certificate, is not what you are authenticated, because it is already self-authenticated by the mere fact that it is part of a regularly conducted activity. And itself, in and of itself, it is a certificate. So it's already certified. So when you're sending all these things to the state and the federal level to get it authenticated, know that what you are authenticating is the signature of the underwriter who initially signed that bond. Figure that part out and that dynamics first, and that will begin to show you how you will become a real party in interest. You say you're a creditor in commerce. You say you're a secure party. You say you're an heir to the land. You say you're a first lien holder. Whatever it is people use these days. If you don't understand that 101, that dynamic, simple stuff, you aren't going anywhere. And I'm here to tell you and show you, give you the clarity. It's been thrown out there, but it's been thrown out there loosely. Once a lie has been repeated so often, it becomes the truth. And a lot of people have accepted the loose, vague truth without actually asking themselves these basics before they go on authenticating birth certificate. Go authenticate it. Cool. Not a problem. We're not speaking to the contrary here. What we're telling you is, what do you know what you're authenticating and why? So that kills the presumption that the birth certificate is what you're authenticating, because it is already deemed as being self-authenticating given the fact that it's part of the regularly conducted business activity. And it is a certificate in and of itself referring to an incident that occurred. We're not here to say whether birth is life or death or your mother snitched on you. We're not talking about that. Everybody has jacked off on that for so long. Let's move past that and move on. So there's Item number 9, item number 11. Item number 8, acknowledged document. A document accompanied by a certificate of acknowledgement that is lawfully executed by a notary public or another officer who is authorized to take acknowledgments. That is what you're doing when you attach your allonge to it. But that's not the end. That does not give you an interest in it in any way. That begins to set you up to have an interest. But if you're merely following instructions and you don't understand these dynamics, you just have all those authenticated papers. When you leave this earth, your children will see it and be clueless about it because you yourself didn't have any idea what it is. Trade inscriptions and the like. An inscription, sign, tag, or label purporting to have been affixed. Whenever you authenticate that birth certificate, they tell you, I have hereto affixed my seal, blah, 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 blah. Trade inscription and the like. That's regarding commercial activity. Affixed in the course of business and indicating origin, ownership, or control. So tell me, when you authenticate that signature to that birth certificate, whose ownership or control are you authenticating? Another question you ought to ask yourself. So that is items 7, 8, 9, and 11. And then 10. Presumption under federal statute. When you take that birth certificate on a federal level to the Department of State to get it authenticated, and you fill out that form for authentication, a signature document or anything else that a federal statute declares to be presumptively or prima facie genuine or authentic. Whenever you do anything in the federal level, federal statutes govern it. So that authentication you're doing on the federal level is only a presumption of authentication. Meaning they hold no power over anything. They rent it. And prima facie, we went over in the past the difference between substantial evidence and prima facie evidence. Prima facie is just what it's on its face. But what proof beyond what we're looking at, all this cute signatures and seals and all these colorful pages? 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Of Rule 902, evidence that is self-authenticated. Now let's go to regular authentication and the act of authenticating something that is not self-authenticated. Examples. To satisfy the requirement of authenticating or identifying an item of evidence. When you authenticate that signature of the underwriter to that blank check called the birth certificate, where the allonge that was created at first was hidden from you, whether it's certificate of live birth or birth certificate, when you authenticate that signature, your intent is to use it as self-authenticating evidence or some type of evidence that makes you the real party of interest. The proponent must produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the item is what the proponent claims it to be. It's self-authenticating regarding their interest to it, but is it self-authenticated regarding your interest to it? Are you authenticating the certificate itself or the signature? And when you authenticate the signature, what does that mean? Ask yourself these basic questions. Before you say, I've authenticated my birth certificate, I send it to the Treasury, I do an affidavit, this, common law, copyright. Okay, so what happens next? All these steps that you're doing, what are the laws behind it? If you're not being shown these basic things, and you're trying to have a right of action, right of claim, an interest, as in real party and interest, and that bond, and the tort or fraud that's in it, is your intent to prove fraud or not? Or is your intent to be able to utilize it in commerce? if you're saying you're a creditor in commerce or secure party creditor or an heir to the land. Ask yourself these basic questions, because most of these concepts that people hold actually contradict each other. And they don't even know these basic simple things about what is authentic, how it's made authentic, and what is self-authenticating, and what they are authenticating. Examples. The following examples only not a complete list of evidence that satisfies the requirement. They're telling you there are more ways that things are authenticated. And what we list here is not a complete list. They're telling you we're not going to give you all the jewels, but take the one that's here and it will lead to the path that you need to know. Testimony of a witness with knowledge. When you authenticate that signature, you are getting, whether it's on a state, county, or federal level, you are getting whoever it is that's issuing you that authenticated launch. You are getting them to testify as a witness that yes, I have knowledge that this signature of the underwriter is authentic. Testimony that an item is what it is claimed to be. And the only prima facie evidence that exists is that that birth certificate has an underwriter who has an interest in it. It doesn't authenticate your interest in it. So even after you have added the affidavit of ownership, do you stop there? Evolve. Once something is given to you, question the fundamental details of it. And then once you take these steps to understand the steps within what you're doing, know that usually you're only given about 25% of it. And if you think that's your source of competence or right of claim, I'm going to keep saying this. It matters not whether it upsets you or not. This is good for you because you need to get away from that state of mind. You are mentally jacking off. If you're stuck on these old things, these things that are partially less than half, we are all in the same class. And I'm telling you, look at this. This is your answer. What you got there is wrong. But hey, it's up to you. You ignore what I'm showing you. These are the basics, rudimentary things. There are international laws regarding authentication that matches perfectly with this, and the ones on your state level. There are treaties that matches perfectly with authentication. There are parts of the UCC that matches perfectly for you to be in a holder in due course, a secure party when it comes to authentication and all these things. But if you don't know these basic rudimentary things, you're lost in the sauce. I hope you're not lost in the sauce. And I'm showing you these things so you can know better. But the least you cannot say is someone has not shown it to you. Forget your own personal interpretation and your feelings about it. See it for what it is. Or not. Best of luck. Hey, and don't forget to join my Patreon. There you will find videos that I don't upload here on YouTube, and my own application of the laws and other aspect of things that I don't speak on here, and some of the documents that I've used. You can also go to the links that's shown on the screen to see the list of documents, and you can listen to these videos through Anchor, and there's an Instagram page and a Facebook page. All right, the link is on the screen and in the description. Take care.